How can you tell if someone's lying to you? How can you tell if someone is purposefully misleading you? Well, we unpack all that today and the tips and the tricks on how you can ensure that you're being told the truth. Gavin Stone is my guest today, and he is an expert at reading body language, eye movement, all of the stuff that spies use to figure out if an operative is being truthful. And how does he know all this? Because he was a spy. This one is fun. Gavin Stone has over 20 years of security and intelligence covert operative experience. He has been globally deployed by government organizations such as the British Ministry of Defense, large corporations, and ultra-high net worth individuals. Throughout his remarkable career, Stone has been called on by clients to consult and train their seasoned operatives and new covert recruits. His training methodology is bespoke, always recognizing the need to understand his client and the trainees. Gavin is a best-selling author of How to Tell If Someone is Lying. I can tell you, I've read this thing cover to cover, and there is a bunch of great info in here, and we're going to go over this. When we finish this podcast, when you finish listening to this podcast, you will be able to tell if someone is lying. That's the name of his book, How to Tell If Someone is Lying. He's an expert at spotting incongruencies in people's words and actions, and we're going to explore that today. We're just going to unpack all that stuff. So you can use this in business. You can use this in your relationships. You can use this when you're negotiating for a house or a car. So even though he worked, in the world of spies and covert intelligence, all of this has practicality in the real world. So without further ado, Gavin, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Great to have you here. I can't wait to dive in because you've got a really intriguing background. We have to talk about it to start. You're a former spy, body language expert, an NLP practitioner. So we kind of have to unpack that and just how does one get into that line of work, right?
Yeah. I get this a lot. I get asked, kind of how did it happen? And so what I'll say, the usual route for most people is they're usually at college, university, whatever, they get a tap on the shoulder, and every kind of major college in the UK, they have a spotter that works for MI6 or works for the Home Office who looks for potential recruits, and they'll say, look, we've got one here. We think he's going to be worthwhile. And then somebody comes and they tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, would you consider coming to work for us? So that's how an intelligence officer usually gets into that line of work. And mine was completely, like everything I ever do in my life was completely backwards. So what happened with me, I kind of started at the bottom. I had a friend knock on the door one day and he said, Gav, look, you're a really resourceful guy. I need some help. I'm trying to find somebody. Can you help me? So I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And we found this person he was looking for, and we handed him an envelope, and we went away, and that was it, and job done. And I didn't really think too much of it until the next month he come around, he got a big envelope of cash, and he said, there you go, that's for you. And I said, well, what's that? He said, you remember that person we found? He said, yeah. He said, that's your share. We were doing something called process serving. And I looked at this big envelope of cash. I'm like, wow. I said, you got any more of them people you won't find him? And, and that was it. It was it launched from there. So I started off with the process serving and like kind of people tracing, which led up to missing persons. It built up to investigations, all manner of different security and investigation kind of work that then went on to just rubbing shoulders with the right people. I did fraud investigations and I started doing some governmental work, and then just up the chain, it went until eventually led up to human intelligence gathering. And so I've done a little bit of everything for everybody, and what we call a jack of all trades, master of none. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's been absolutely brilliant. So, and it's had its downsides as well. But yeah, an unusual and unorthodox work means of getting into that work. But yeah, I was happy enough to take what I could get.
Love it. I'm sure I'm interested. I'm sure the listeners would be interested in is when you got into, government intelligence and operative intelligence. Some of the stuff I'm sure is classified, but can you share with us, what surprised you in that particular role? And I'm sure you've got great stories from all these different experiences you've cataloged, but as an actual intelligence operative working for the government, is there anything that you're allowed to talk about that was surprising to you? Just You shook your head like,
Oh,
wow.
yeah. Lots. Number one, how incompetent most of the government are. So there's lots that that surprised me that were because I mean I was like very Hollywood educated like most people, and I have said this before, but I remember going down the road of thinking that, like everybody else, you know, you get called in to do something, and there'd be a slideshow of like, this is the man we're looking for, and he's a super criminal, and he lives on this island, and you know, you're going to be parachuted in, and you know, and blah blah blah, and yeah, and of course, you know, you get this slideshow, and then all of a sudden, at the end of it all, people start passing your files, and phones start ringing, and there's a big buzz, and of course. What actually happened in reality is I got sat down in a room. One of my very first intelligence assignments, I got sat down, not the first, but one of the first. I got sat down in a room, and they looked at me and they said, find out how Russia is getting railgun information out of Korea. And that was it. No slideshow, no buzzing, no phones, no nothing. And I was waiting for it all to happen. You know, I was waiting for all these things to start being passed to me. And there was nothing. And instead, what I got was, what are you still doing here? You know, so I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. That didn't happen how I expected. Not much to go on there. So that was it. You know, it was a bit of a reality check when, you know, when I was kind of that was it. My entire kind of assignment was given to me in one sentence. And then I was like, okay, you know, do I not get any gadgets? You know, that's disappointing.
Where's my exploding pen? Come on, I want an exploding pen. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, so I didn't get any of that. So yeah, that was quite upsetting.
And you write in your book, again titled "How to Tell if Someone is Lying." You write about all of these different tactics and approaches, but you're very clear up front. Do not take any one of these as a singularity and say, this is how to tell. You talk about patterns being very, very important and establishing a baseline for anyone. Can you open up and speak to that, please?
Yeah, so the first and most important thing with anything you do, any of this, is establishing that baseline and what is normal for a person. Because if you don't know what's normal for a person, then you don't know what's abnormal. So the first and most important thing you've got to do is establish how they normally behave. And one of the hardest things that I struggle to explain to so many people is the baseline itself can even move. So how you normally act when you're in front of your mother-in-law might be completely different to how you will act down the bar with the lads, and how you will act down the bar with the lads will be completely different to how you would act in a court of law. So your baseline will change depending on your environment, depending on the company you're with and whatever else. So, but once you've established how that person normally acts and what is normal for them, then you can start looking for abnormalities. And yes, you're definitely on the mark when you said, you know, there's no one thing. You can't turn around and say, oh, he scratched his nose, he's lying. You're looking for what I call a cluster. You're looking for several things happening at once, and that could be anything from blink rate, breath location, breath rate, verbal tells as well as physical tells. So there could be and you're looking for as many of these things as you can. And it sounds like a lot when I say it all at once. But if I were to act it, if I were to, kind of fold my arms and go, nah, not for me. And all of a sudden you've seen different things as well as heard different things. The big intake of breath. I've leaned back, I've folded my arms, I've tilted my head, I've answered how I might not normally answer. All of those things put together should be something that makes you go, hang on, why was that different? That's not how he normally talks. What's going on there?
Yeah. Well, let's dive in. Talking about those specific things. So, in the earlier part of your book, you talk about eye movement and where people's eyes go when they're recalling information, and where their eyes may go if they're creating information, fabricating information. So let's start with that, please. Let's start with eye movement, because all this is I have several of these notes I want to ask you about, because it's all fascinating. And but you start with eye movement, so let's begin there.
Yeah, and it's a nice, easy one, and it's one of the kind of the go-to if you want something. So out of all the things that there are to watch, where you can say, well, this is going to give me a higher percentage on its own than anything else, eye accessing cues are definitely, that would be the one that I would recommend. And what you're looking for is the direction that the eye movement, the direction the eyes go when they're thinking and processing information. So if I were to say to you right now, okay, Roger, I want you to think back and tell me what the color of the walls were in your third grade classroom. And I will watch your eyes, so they've gone up and right. So what's happening is you've now gone back into your long-term memory with them going up, as I'm looking at you on the screen. So for you personally, it'd be up and left, but for me, I'm looking up and right.
Yeah, you're right. I went up to the left.
So you've gone back. That's where your long-term memory is. That's where you're going to go to access your long-term memory and recall information. Now, if I were to say to you right now, what I want you to do, Roger, I want you to visualize a purple giraffe with feathered wings and pink nail varnish on its hooves that breathes fire, and it's going to fly across in front of you, right? And now you've gone the opposite way. You've gone up and left, or what would be for you up and right. So that's where you go to create something, because I should imagine you've probably never seen one of those kind of zebras before, at a guess.
Not in a long time. Not in a long time.
So you're not going to be recalling that information. You're going to be creating it. You're going to be visualizing it. So now I know from those two questions, I know where you go for information. They don't have to be those particular two questions. There can be any two questions, but you once you've established where the person's eye accessing cues are, then you can basically, if I say to you now, right, I want to know what you did on this particular night, and your eyes go open right, I know you're recalling. If your eyes go open left, then I know that you're trying to create something to cover up, what you're telling to me. So the Pentagon actually spent a lot of time and money trying to disprove this. And the reason being that they made two vital mistakes. Number one, they tested it on soldiers, and that doesn't work out so well, because soldiers have, as you know, drilled. So they don't a lot of the times have to think to react. That in the same way where they're trained, they know exactly on the body where everything is. They know where their ammos are, where their first aid kits are, where the grenades are. They know where everything is. So you can ask them a question. Where do you keep your first aid kit? And they'll go, "Oh, it's here." And of course, they don't need to think about it. There's no eye access in cue, because it's instinctive. They've had it drilled into them that many times in practices and maneuvers. So that was the first problem. And the second problem, the Pentagon just wanted a map. They didn't want to have to establish a baseline for the eye accessing cues every time they were talking to a new person. They just wanted to say, look, if his eyes go to the left, he's lying. If they go to the right, he's not. And they wanted a one-size-fits-all, and it doesn't work like that. So as you can imagine, it was kind of thrown out pretty quick, but it's accurate, believe me.
Yeah, for sure. Gavin, let's discuss. You use the term, terminology, memory distortion and memory pollution. And it's kind of fascinating. I would the layperson's way of saying it is the telephone game. It kind of changes as it goes along. But you talk about memory distortion and memory pollution. Please speak to that.
So, this is one of the reasons why, after an incident, the police will interview somebody to get an account of what happened as quickly as possible. So, if ever you see like either a really nasty accident or a burglary or a bank robbery or something like that, and the police are all there taking notes, and people are going, well, why aren't they doing this? And why aren't they out chasing? They need to get the information from the people's mind as fast as they possibly can, because they've discovered, even with the words that are used, you're already distorting what they can remember. So you could turn around and say, right, what was the getaway car? And they go, oh, do you know what? I don't know. A Taurus, a Mustang, I'm not sure. Now, you could interview the next person and say, what was the getaway vehicle? And they might turn and say, oh, vehicle, I think it was a van. And just by the different use of words, you've changed the entire dynamic. Now you've got two different stories of two different witnesses. This was proved by Elizabeth Loftus. And she basically did a fantastic psychological experiment about implanting false memories. But one of the things she did when she was doing the psychological experiment with a car accident, she found if she turned around and said, what speed would you say the vehicles were going when they bumped into each other, they would say a lower speed than if they asked people what speed were the vehicles going when they crashed into each other. Just by changing that one word, they would double the speed of it. So the first lot, when they say bump, they say, oh, probably about 20, 25 mile an hour. When they use the word crashed, they say, oh, probably about 40, 50 mile an hour. So like I say, just that one word, it can change everything. And that memory pollution or memory distortion can be vital, especially in court cases and even more so in human intelligence gathering.
Yeah. It's actually a little scary too, to know that your guilt or innocence could hinge on how the investigators ask the questions. I never stopped to think about that, but yikes.
The eyewitnesses are, really, really not something that, in my opinion, should ever be considered 100% reliable. And the whole, like I said, the whole Elizabeth Loftus experiment was so that if you look up Loftus and Palmer's memory implantation, it's all about basically they developed a method of implanting memories into people of things that hadn't happened. And in no time at all, they were convinced they'd been on a hot air balloon flight when they'd never even been in a hot air balloon in their life. It's absolutely amazing what you can do. There was other ones where the subjects believed they were lost in the mall as a child because they implanted the memory, to make them believe it. So very powerful stuff, amazing. And as you can imagine, our government, they jumped on that. They love that stuff.
And Gavin, we're not talking about hypnosis. We're talking about a different way of asking questions and suggestive. This is a different approach than hypnosis, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this isn't hypnosis. This is just literally through, like you say, the power of suggestion and other factors that are all combined to kind of implant a memory. And there's no electronics or probes or anything crazy like that. It's all done verbally.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. You specifically spend time in the book writing about so when you ask somebody, were you there that, did you murder that guy or did you steal that car? Mm-hmm. And you spend time in the book writing on convincing versus conveying. And then in that sub context, if we can really unpack that, you talk about convincing versus conveying and how people that are telling the truth will do one and people that are not will do the other. And then kind of those subtopics are lies of commission, lies of omission, and lies of influence. So if we can first start with convincing versus conveying and what to look for how to tell if somebody is being truthful with you or if they're falsifying information. And then let's go a little deeper into those three different lies of commission, omission, and influence.
Yeah, sure. So I love this bit because there's a fantastic interview. I think it was with John McAfee where the interviewer said to him, "Did you kill this particular man?" And John McAfee said, "I barely even knew the man." And that was it. He didn't say he didn't kill him. And that there is not only a lie of omission, but it's also trying to convince. So you see, the beauty of this is truth tellers have got one thing on their side that liars don't. That's the truth. So they don't have to convince you of anything. They know that they're telling the truth. So it's like, this is what happened, and they will just relay the facts. Whereas people who are lying, they don't have the truth on their side. So they will do their best to convince you that they're telling the truth. So this is where that you'll start hearing the things like, did you kill that man? No, I didn't know that man. I wasn't even in the town at the time. And you can ask anybody around here. They know that I wasn't around. And my car was even spotted miles away. They'll go into a ramble of all the possible reasons why they couldn't have possibly done it. Whereas somebody who's telling the truth would just go, no, I didn't kill him. That's it. Yeah. They might then get asked, where were you and what happened? And they can say, well, I was here and you can check it out. They don't need to over explain because, like I say, they've got the truth on their side.
Yeah. So they're conveying because they're just conveying information that is truth versus exactly. I'm trying to convince you of something else. Yeah. So then how does that, and I love that example that, I don't know if that was in the book, but I love that example that you just gave in real time about John McAfee, which I believe wasn't he the founder of like the McAfee antivirus?
That's the one. Yeah.
Is that the same? Yeah. Graham, a crazy story about that guy. But the lies of commission and then lies of omission and then lies of influence. Just please go through each one of those because it was so insightful as I read your book on, man, I've actually had people do that to me. Like, wow, I've had people do that to me and now I can see it. So talk about those three.
So lies of commission is what I call an outright lie. It's kind of, Roger, are you wearing a black T-shirt? And you say to me, no, I'm not. Now you've just blatantly lied to me because you are wearing one. So that's something that, if I didn't know on the screen, if I couldn't see you, then I would just go, okay, obviously he's not wearing one. And that's just what most people call a blatant lie. That's a lie of commission. A lie of omission is if I couldn't see you and I said, Roger, are you wearing a black T-shirt? And you go, I don't even know if I've got a black T-shirt. Now, you haven't told me no. You haven't told me you're not wearing one. You've just said, I don't even know if I've got one. Or, so there's lots of ways this can be done. It can be used, like I say, the John McAfee instance. You can have it where you could say to somebody, have you stolen my wallet? And they go, I don't even know where you keep your wallet. And again, they haven't said no. And that's the most important thing. You're listening for that singular, most important word, no. It doesn't matter what comes afterwards, but that no needs to come first. If someone says no, I don't know where you keep your wallet, then it's different to somebody who just omits the facts.
Gavin, is a lie of omission easier for a liar to use because in their own mind, well, they're not lying. They're in their own mind, of course. Because they haven't said no. So do you find that a lie of commission, are you wearing a black T-shirt, Roger? No. Well, plain as day you are. Where omission, I don't even know if I own a black T-shirt. It's easier for me consciously to say, because we all have some level of, guilt, I would imagine. Hopefully everyone's got a little bit of that. And is it just easier for people to use a lie of omission than commission?
Yeah. Definitely. It's what I call, it's easier to lie with a yes than a no. It's one of those scenarios where if ever you are in a position where you're asking somebody yes or no questions, it's easier for someone, did you do such and such? And they go, yes, and it not be true than to say no. For some reason, the word no has this negative connotation, which allows people to kind of feel more guilt than when they're lying with a yes. And very much the same with lies of omission. It's their way. It's almost like a subconscious clause of saying, I didn't lie to him. I just told him I don't even know if I have a black T-shirt. So it's kind of it's the devil's small print, as we like to say. It's something that they're not necessarily in their mind lying. So therefore it's just they're evading the question more so than answering it. So it's definitely a lot easier for people to kind of use a lie of omission than a lie of commission.
It makes total sense. So a lie of influence, and you write about this also in your book around using, almost going above and beyond, so to speak. So talk about that.
Yeah, I love these ones, and these are hugely powerful because what they're doing is they're convincing the subject that they're almost crazy for even asking the question in the first place. And I know somebody who used to do it, and you'd say, hey, did you do X? And he'd put his arm around you and say, listen to me. I do work for the church every Sunday. I donate this to charity once a month. I do this for the community, and I do that, and I give this and I give that. Do you really think if I was going to do all of that I'd steal a few boxes from the back of your van? And of course, you feel like such an idiot. You go, I suppose not. But the truth of the matter is he was stealing the boxes from the back of the van. He had stolen the boxes from the back of the van. He never denied stealing the boxes from the back of the van. But what he did is he convinced you were stupid for asking the question. And that's what they call a lie of influence, because you start to buy into their narrative of, oh, yeah, he's such a good person. He does give to charity. He does work for the church. He does do X, Y, and Z. And therefore, you kind of doubt your own kind of feelings of believing that he could have stolen something. So therefore, you buy into the narrative, and like I say, you convince yourself, which is worse than somebody lying to you, and you go, well, I'm not sure if I believe them still. It's so that's why it's so powerful.
Yeah. The crazy thing is, somebody that is really good at lying, they've mastered that craft. They've mastered the craft of lying to beat the person asking the questions. You talked about the Pentagon, and they were trying to find like an easy way to do it, and you're very straightforward in your book about you have to find patterns, you have to establish a benchmark, and then you look for breaks in those patterns, and that will give you your answer, or congruency with those patterns, which means they're probably telling the truth. But is there, as the listeners, we're listening to this podcast and they're going into work, or they're going home, or they're talking to their kids. I've got 2 kids, and of course, raising kids is never easy. Did you break that vase? No. Okay, that's a lie of commission right there. But are there any tips, tricks? And I don't want to underplay, because you're so detailed about, you have to be thorough, but are there any tips or tricks that you could give that are easy tells regarding body language? If we specifically talk about body language, what would be some easy tells? Of course, they have to be in that whole body of evidence, but when you talk about body language, what would you be looking for?
So, I mean, if it's with kids, I mean, there's an easy one which I put in there about the broken vase, which we can revisit later if you want to. But with adults, what I would look for, one of the most, it's almost counterintuitive because of so many urban myths. What I'll be looking for is eye contact. And there's this kind of myth that if somebody can maintain eye contact with you, that they're telling the truth. And if somebody breaks eye contact, they can't look you in the eye when they're talking, and therefore they're lying. It's actually completely the opposite. So what's going to happen is if somebody's lying to you, they will hold that eye contact with you constantly, because they want to see if you're believing their lies. They want to take in as much information as they possibly can to see if you're buying into their story. Whereas somebody who isn't lying, if they're telling the truth and just, it's a case of, Gavin, did you eat my donut? And I go, no, and look away and carry on. Then I don't need to continue looking at you to see if you're believing me. I didn't eat it, so not my problem. Whereas somebody who did eat the donut will be staring, going, all right, is he buying this? Is there any more questions coming? Does he believe me? And therefore they'll hold that eye contact a lot longer. It'll be a lot more prolonged than somebody who's telling the truth. So that's one of the easiest kind of body language signs to look for. And if it's more than one question, if it's an ongoing conversation and you're asking about a specific subject, watch their body language and just think about it like this. If they're open with their posture, then they're more likely more comfortable with the conversation. If they're closed with their posture, then they're more likely less comfortable with the conversation. It might not necessarily mean they're lying, but it does mean their stress rate is elevated. So it is important, and this is one of the real hard balances to get, is to not stress them out about the subject. The stress signals you're looking for must be connected to a lie, not because you're driving them crazy.
Hey everyone, as you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from, and again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. Gavin, one of the things that you write about in your book that I literally saw with my kids when I would challenge them on something is they would physically get smaller. They would physically make themselves smaller. And you write about people, adults doing that subconsciously, of course, almost as in this, you can't see me. I'm hiding. You can't see me. I'm invisible. Kind of, again, open up on that. That would be interesting to understand the behavior behind that.
Yeah. So it's kind of nicknamed turtlenecking because when you do it, you're kind of shrinking like this, and you start to look like a turtle, receding into the shell. So kind of, the shoulders come up, the neck comes down, the arms come in, and you're making yourself smaller. And the reason for this is it's all to do with the limbic brain's method of coping with what is potentially a threat. So in the modern world, a threat and a physical threat, we know in our kind of logical mind that one is completely different to the other. But our like kind of limbic brain system, a threat is still a threat. So we don't know, it doesn't know the difference between what's a physical threat and a kind of verbal threat, as it were. So the reaction, the physiological reaction, is identical each and every time, because if it was a saber-toothed tiger or something like that was coming for us, naturally we go into fight or flight. And of course, if we either freeze or you notice if ever you see somebody, you have something, you make them jump, they kind of go to that kind of freezing position where their arms come in and their arms come up, and their shoulders come up. And that's because naturally they're trying to defend all their vital organs, all the most important parts. So that's the kind of position the body will take. And because of it, when you're giving somebody a verbal threat or they're feeling threatened verbally by exposure of the lie, the same part of the brain is creating the same physiological reaction. So naturally, you're going to shrink your body down and try and protect those vital organs and kind of have the same response.
Makes sense. Makes total sense. You expand a little bit on this in your book. How important then is body language when building a relationship? So let's not say, we're always trying to find somebody in a lie, but we're trying to build a relationship and have a richer, fuller life. What level does body language play in that?
And for me, it's been absolutely wonderful in more areas of my life than just kind of deception detection. Whether it's networking with friends and in business, whether it's finding a partner, it could be any number of things. And more importantly, day to day kind of, or even, for example, if you go to buy a used car. It's absolutely wonderful when you're kind of dealing with the car salesman, and you'll ask them a question, and then all of a sudden you can spot a complete load of BS, and you go, yeah, no, I'm not buying what you're selling there. So you can kind of look through it. So it's important for that side of things. But again, like I say, body language with even your boss at work. You can tell whether he likes you or doesn't like you just by learning a little bit more about how people are acting around you and their responses to your presence. So it's been pretty vital for me, that's for sure.
You can't tell because I'm sitting down as you are, but I'm pretty tall, so I'm 6'4", and if we're standing in a circle talking or at a party or something, it's just more. I'm so tall; it's more comfortable for me to stand with my arms crossed. But I always am thinking subconsciously or consciously, like, gosh, I hope they don't think that I'm not interested or I'm being smug or what, because this is like the international sign of I'm not very happy right now, but it happens to be pretty damn comfortable for me, and so it is funny because I always catch myself like unfolding my arms and then refolding them because it's more comfortable, but that's such an international thing, right?
It is, and the thing is, loads of people say, how kind of, he's folded his arms, so he's being deceptive, and or he's folded his arms, so he's been, what's the word? Defensive, and the truth of the matter is, very much like me, I fold my arms because I'm comfortable folding my arms. It's if I'll be sitting down watching a movie and I'll fold my arms because it's how I like to sit. It's kind of it's just become habitual for me. And it's a shame because people do automatically see it, and it's another one of these misconceptions that you're being defensive or whatever because your arms are folded or you're uncomfortable, and it's not actually the case. So. So I do know. I know exactly how you feel there. So you become very conscientious of it. When you're around people.
Exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Conscientious. Yeah. Let's pivot. Just a couple more questions on this. Neuro-linguistic programming. I first learned about that from reading a Tony Robbins motivational book 30 years ago, and. And I've read more on NLP, and you are an NLP practitioner. Speak to the audience about what that entails, and then how do you utilize it?
Right. So I will start with something called anchoring because it was where I started when I started to learn NLP. And for me, it's hugely powerful. There's loads of ways of doing it. And if I run through some of the easiest ways, and the reasons why it works, we can take it from there. So if you look at it like this, if I am sitting at home with my wife and we're watching a comedy show and she starts laughing at something that she finds fun and I touch her left elbow. And this is something I do every time she's smiling or she's happy or she's, there's something positive happening. And I do what's called setting an anchor, because subconsciously she will associate that being touched on the left elbow with something positive. Now, to give you an idea of how it works, it's a bit like conditioning with Pavlov and his dogs. I don't know whether you're familiar with the psychological experiment. He'd ring the bell, he'd put the dog food down, the dogs would salivate and eat the food. And then eventually, after doing it for the conditioning for so long, he'd ring the bell and the dogs would start to salivate without him having to put the food down. And that kind of conditioning is what happened through association, because they'd associate the bell with the food. So you're doing exactly the same thing, but this time you're doing it with a person. So you touch them on the left elbow every time something positive happens, every time they're laughing, every time they're having a great time, anything really, really positive, then you touch them on the left elbow. And it's something you can do. You can say something at the time if you really need to reinforce it. So you can touch them on the left elbow and go, this is funny, isn't it? Or, oh, aren't we having fun? Or whatever the case may be, whatever you want to do to kind of, so that it just, they're not going to not question, like, why is he touching my left elbow? You kind of, so just like you tap somebody on the shoulder or touch somebody on the arm when you're talking, you do it in exactly the same way. And eventually what you do is you set that anchor to the point where that's set for something associated with positivity. Now, you can do exactly the same thing on the other side, on the right elbow, with negativity. Every time your wife's crying or something sad happens or it's a dreadful day or she's just broke a glass or whatever, then you can touch the other elbow and say, oh dear, don't worry, we'll sort it out. Now, what will happen is that sets the anchor on the other side for negativity. So where I've used this with my wife, for example, is if I want, then once I've set the anchor and it's I've done it again and again and again and again and I've conditioned, I will eventually get to the point where I will say to my wife, hey, and I'll touch her on the elbow, the positive elbow, and say, hey, do you mind if I go out for a drink with the lads this Friday? And because I've touched her on that positive elbow, she's going to associate what I've just asked, that question, with positivity and go, yeah, sure, carry on. Now, if she comes to me and says, oh, I want to go to my mother-in-law's for Thanksgiving, I can touch her on the other elbow and say, you sure that's a good idea? And she's going to associate that with negativity and go, yeah, no, I'm not here. So this is how it works. And again, some people are more susceptible to it than others, but it does work on everybody. It can take longer to set those anchors in some people than others. But it does work, and it doesn't have to be a physical anchor. It doesn't have to be through touch. It can be audible. It can be visual. It can be any number of things. And to give you an example here, everybody has that one song that they hear, and for no apparent reason, they're just going down the road and that song comes on and they'll turn the volume up and go, I love this, this makes me feel good, and they put the windows down and all of a sudden they're praying that there's not a highway patrol further up behind an advertising board because they've got their foot to the metal, and then you got, on the flip side, you've got other songs that, the stereo comes on and people are like, oh, they turn it right off. I can't stand that song. They don't know why. They just know they can't stand it, or it makes them sad, or it makes them cry, or whatever the case may be. And it's purely because an audible anchor has been set at some point in their life. At some point, they were having a really, really great day, and that song was playing. Or they were having a really, really bad day, and the other song was playing. And that way, every time they hear that song, they just feel good. So they blast it up. Yeah. So, yeah, and that's just the power of association through NLP.
I done a lot of reading on and trying to help people. I really enjoy public speaking, but as you know, some people are absolutely terrified of it. And anchoring, I didn't realize it was NLP, but anchoring is something I will help people establish so that they can be more comfortable. And, but you have to, get in that really good headspace, and then you set the anchor, get in that great headspace again, set the anchor. And then before they go on stage, when they start to get anxious, set that anchor again to kind of bring the heart rate down and get back in that happy place. Yeah, but it's funny because I didn't realize that was NLP.
Exactly. You don't have to always do it on somebody else. You can, I do it. I set one on my knuckle that, if ever I'm having a bad day, I don't feel so great, I can just touch that knuckle. I can fire that anchor for myself to make myself feel great. So yeah, it's not always about mind control over other people.
Yeah, for sure. So A couple last questions, and I ask these to all my guests. One is there a book, and you can't pick your own, that's not fair, but is there a book that you've read that had a real impact on you? Because my listeners know that I'm a big reader, and I love just eternal learning, just never stop learning, and books are one of my favorite way to learn. And so I always like to have guests offer a book that they've read, and this could be when you were younger, this could be last week, that it had a major impact on you, and you'd love to share it with the listeners so that if they're interested, they could pick up a copy as well. What's the title of the book, and what's the author?
Oh, yes, without doubt. And I've plugged this book several times. I'm not on any kind of commission from James Clear, but, I dare say at some point he'll probably come across it, because every time I get asked this question, I always say the same thing. It's almost a default answer. And it's a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's probably the best nonfiction book I've ever read. It really genuinely is life-changing if you put to use the knowledge from between the covers.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. What you said at your very last statement, I think, is the most important thing. If you put the knowledge to work, right? It's not just reading it,
Yeah.
like actually using it. There's so many great books that people read it, they set it down, they never take action. It's all about taking action.
Yeah.
So, Gavin, last two questions. These were kind of fun. I'm sure you're going to live this very positive, rich, full life. But if we could, let's fast forward to the end of your life, and we're at your funeral, and you're looking down from above, and a loved one is reading your eulogy, but that loved one can only say 3 words to describe. They can only pick 3 descriptors, if you will, to describe the life that Gavin lived and the impact he had on others and whatnot. What 3 words do you hope that person says about you?
Did his best. I would probably go for that. Did his best.
That's concise and great. Love it. Love it.
Yeah, it's something that I from my point of view, it goes back to what you were saying just about kind of putting into action. It's no good having all the knowledge, and even if you've got the knowledge, it's no good doing anything half cocked. You've got to go all in and do your best, and in absolutely everything you do. And if your best isn't good enough, then at least you did do your best, and at least you give it a shot.
Wise words. Wise words. Last question. I've got one more after, just so people can get a hold of you and follow you. But last question. And we're gonna suspend reality here. I'm gonna hand you a magic wand, and you tonight can wave that magic wand and make one change to the world as we know it today, so that tomorrow we all wake up and the world is different in one way. How would the world be different according to Gavin?
Okay. I would change the dynamic of how countries operate. And I would quite simply have it whereas instead of mayors and councillors and government officials and all these people got paid a set wage, and no matter how good or bad their kind of city or their town or their country was doing, they were all living a cushy life. I would change it where you got paid by performance. The better your city does, the more you get paid. If your city goes downhill, you don't get paid. If you sort out the homeless, you get paid more. If you sort out the veterans, you get paid more. If you make your city just a better place, lower crime and a better place to live, a place where people want to be, then you're rewarded. And if you don't, and if your city goes downhill, then you're removed from that position indefinitely, and and somebody else is brought in to do a better job. And that's the kind of system I would say, if I could do anything to change the world, that's the system I'd have in place. And it's in the people's best interest, not the people running the country.
The people's best interest. So I'm sure you're aware, Warren Buffett is one of the best investors of all time, certainly here in the States. And he's famous for saying, because, we in America, we have I think it's a $24 trillion deficit. I mean, it's mind numbing. It's not even fathomable. And he said, you could balance the budget tomorrow. You could have a non-deficit year in 2024 tomorrow if you passed one piece of legislation, which of course will never be passed because the senators and the Congress people won't allow it, but that a sitting senator or congressperson could not run for re-election if we were running a deficit. He said you'd balance it immediately because they would fix it, but there's no incentive. There's no incentive. Yeah. Well, hey, Gavin, really important question is, you've shared some just cool insight, and this has been fun. This has just been so fun for me, and I know it's been fun for the listeners. How would they follow you, connect with you, be part of your journey? How do they follow you and get a hold of you?
Okay, so I'm on all the usual social media sites like Facebook and Twitter, and so that's like great for keeping up to date with book releases or that kind of thing. I'm on LinkedIn if anybody wants to approach me for like kind of coaching or any kind of work or investigative work, that kind of thing. I offer statement analysis services, and I get law enforcement and that kind of thing occasionally send me videos to analyze, and then finally I have a YouTube channel which is simply at Gavin Stone Author, and I get a lot of my friends who are former spies from like KGB, CIA, MI6, FBI, and they all come on and we talk about what we call Tradecraft Thursdays, and we talk about the different stories that we've all got from the field and the things we've done in our line of work over the years, which is it's great fun. So if you want to know a little bit more about not just what I've done, but some of the people I've worked with or some of the friends I know and people I've become friends with over the years, and their stories from working, spying in different countries and that kind of thing, then it's definitely worth checking that out too.
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds like a lot of fun. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, here's a copy of the book or cover of the book, How to Tell If Someone is Lying by Gavin Stone. And again, we'll put this in the show notes if you're listening on Spotify or Apple. Gavin, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Again, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.